The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay as I stepped into the abandoned subway station, my flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. The station, once a bustling hub of activity, now stood silent, its walls adorned with peeling posters and graffiti. My name is Jae Yun, an urban explorer with a fascination for the forgotten places beneath Seoul. Tonight, I sought to document the eerie beauty of this underground relic, unaware of the horror that awaited me. As I ventured deeper, the temperature dropped, sending a shiver down my spine. The sound of my own footsteps echoed ominously, but beneath them, I began to hear something else, faint, indistinguishable whispers. At first, I dismissed them as the wind or perhaps my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I moved further into the tunnel, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from all directions, a cacophony of hushed voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. My heart raced as I tried to rationalize the phenomenon. Maybe it was the sound of water dripping or the distant hum of the city above. But the whispers felt too deliberate, too aware. I stopped in my tracks, my breath coming in short gasps. The voices seemed to respond, growing louder, more aggressive. I felt a presence, something unseen watching me from the shadows. Panic set in as I realized I was no longer alone. The whispers became screams, silent yet deafening, filling my head with an unbearable pressure. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move, paralyzed by an overwhelming sense of dread. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the sensation of cold hands gripping my ankles, pulling me into the darkness. When I awoke, I was back at the entrance of the station, my equipment scattered around me. There was no sign of the whispers or the hands, but the memory of their touch lingered. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. But sometimes, when the city is quiet, I swear I can still hear the silent screams beneath Seoul, calling me back to the tunnels. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and ancient dust as I descended the narrow staircase into one of Seoul's forgotten underground bunkers. My name is Jae Yun, a freelance photographer with a fascination for the city's hidden histories. Tonight, I was here to document these relics of the Cold War, their walls whispering stories of fear and survival. The bunker was a maze of narrow corridors and empty rooms, the silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. My flashlight cast long shadows that seemed to move just beyond the edge of my vision. I set up my camera, the click of the shutter echoing ominously in the stillness. The first few shots were uneventful, just crumbling walls and rusted pipes. But then, as I reviewed the images on my camera's screen, my blood ran cold. In the last photo, a shadowy figure stood at the end of the corridor, its features indistinct but undeniably human. I hadn't seen anyone else down here, hadn't heard a sound. My heart pounded as I turned to look back down the hallway, but there was nothing there. Just the empty darkness. I tried to rationalize it, a trick of the light, perhaps, or my own exhaustion playing tricks on me. But the figure in the photo was too clear, too deliberate. I took a deep breath and decided to take another shot, my hands trembling slightly. The camera flashed, and in that split second, I thought I saw movement in the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I checked the new image. The figure was closer now, its outline more defined, though its face remained a blur. Panic set in, a primal fear that urged me to run. But curiosity held me in place. Who, or what, was this figure? I called out, my voice echoing through the bunker, but there was no response. Just that oppressive silence. I took one more photo, my last. This time, the figure was right in front of me, its hand reaching out as if to touch the lens. I didn't wait to see the result. I turned and ran, the sound of my own footsteps like thunder in the quiet. I didn't stop until I was back in the open air, the city lights a comforting sight. Later, at home, I mustered the courage to look at the final photo. The screen was blank, save for a single word scrawled across it in a handwriting that wasn't mine: help. I don't know what I captured in those photos, but I know this: some secrets are meant to stay buried. And some screams, no matter how silent, are never meant to be heard. Break time equals 5s, greater than the night was unusually quiet as Min Jun stepped into the dimly lit underground shopping mall, a shortcut he often took to avoid the chilly Seoul air. The mall, usually bustling with life during the day, was eerily deserted at this hour, save for the occasional janitor or security guard. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with every step he took. Min Jun tightened his coat around him, not just against the cold but against the sudden unease that prickled at the back of his neck. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The sound of his own footsteps echoed off the tiled floors, a rhythmic tap that was suddenly joined by another, softer set of steps. He paused, listening. The second set of footsteps stopped as well. Min Jun's heart raced as he took a few more steps, the other footsteps mirroring his own. He stopped again, and so did they. The silence that followed was deafening. He turned around, expecting to see someone, but the corridor was empty. The air grew colder, and Min Jun could see his breath fogging in front of him. A sense of dread settled in his stomach as he realized the footsteps were not coming from behind him but from beneath the floor. The sound was muffled, as if someone, or something, was walking in the tunnels below the mall. Min Jun's mind raced with urban legends of Seoul's underground, tales of abandoned subway lines and the lost souls said to wander them. He quickened his pace, the footsteps beneath him keeping up effortlessly. The exit seemed farther away than before, the corridor stretching endlessly. Then, the lights went out. In the darkness, Min Jun could hear the footsteps stop right beneath him. A cold hand brushed against his ankle, and he screamed, but no sound came out. The mall was silent once more, save for the distant sound of footsteps fading into the depths below. The next morning, Min Jun was found sitting in the middle of the corridor, his eyes wide with terror, muttering about the silent screams beneath Seoul. No one believed his story, but from that night on, the underground mall was never the same. Some say if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can still hear the footsteps stopping when you do, and feel the cold hands reaching up from below. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air was thick with the smell of damp and decay as Ji-hoon led the way, his flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness of the sewer tunnel. Behind him, Min Jun and Suah followed closely, their breaths shallow, the sound echoing off the wet, tiled walls. They had come seeking adventure, a story to tell, something to break the monotony of their daily lives. But now, as the tunnel narrowed and the light from the entrance faded, the adventure felt more like a descent into something they couldn't understand. Ji-hoon paused, his light catching something on the wall. "Guys, look at this," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant drip of water. The beam of his flashlight illuminated a series of small, fresh handprints pressed into the grime of the wall. They were child-sized, too small to belong to any of them. A chill ran down Suah's spine. "That's impossible," she murmured, reaching out but stopping just short of touching the prints. "No one's been down here in years." Min Jun swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Maybe it's some kind of prank?" he offered, though his voice lacked conviction. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of their own rapid heartbeats. Then, from somewhere deeper in the tunnel, a sound, a whisper, or perhaps just the wind through the pipes. But there was no wind down here. Ji-hoon's grip on his flashlight tightened. "We should go back," he said, but even as the words left his mouth, the light flickered, then died, plunging them into darkness. Suah gasped, her hand finding Min Jun's arm in the blackness. "What was that?" she breathed. The sound came again, closer this time, a soft shuffling, like small feet moving quickly over the wet floor. Ji-hoon fumbled with his flashlight, cursing under his breath as it refused to turn back on. The shuffling stopped, replaced by the faintest sound of breathing, not theirs. Something was in the tunnel with them. Min-jun's mind raced, his body frozen in fear. He wanted to run, but his legs refused to move. Then, a touch, light, like a child's hand brushing against his own. He jerked away with a strangled cry, the sound echoing through the tunnels. The flashlight suddenly flickered to life, casting long shadows on the walls. The handprints were gone, replaced by words scratched into the tile, Korean characters that read, "They are watching." The friends exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They turned and ran, the sound of small, laughing voices following them into the darkness. They never spoke of what happened in the sewers, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, they could still hear the whispers, calling them back. The handprints never appeared again, but the words remained, a warning to those who dared to delve too deep into the silent screams beneath Seoul. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air in Seoul's underground tunnels is thick with the scent of damp concrete and ancient dust, a labyrinth beneath the bustling city where sunlight never reaches. I came here to document the urban legends that locals whisper about in hushed tones, tales of disappearances, of voices echoing without a source, of shadows that move on their own. My name is Alex, and I'm an investigator of the unexplained, but nothing could have prepared me for what I would encounter beneath the streets of Seoul. The initial descent was uneventful, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing graffiti-covered walls and the occasional discarded item. But as I ventured deeper, the temperature plummeted, my breath visible in the air despite it being midsummer above ground. That's when I first felt it, a brush against my arm, so light I thought it might have been a draft. But drafts don't have fingers. My heart raced as I swung my flashlight around, the beam revealing nothing but empty tunnel. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind in such an oppressive environment. But then it happened again, this time on my back, and I could have sworn I heard a whisper, too faint to make out words, but undeniably human. The rational part of me screamed to leave, to run back to the surface where the world made sense. But the investigator in me, the part that sought out the truth no matter how unsettling, urged me forward. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices overlapping, some pleading, others angry, all emanating from the darkness around me. My flashlight began to flicker, the shadows stretching and contorting in ways that defied logic. Then, the temperature dropped so suddenly it felt like plunging into ice water, and I saw them, figures, barely more than silhouettes, lining the tunnel. They didn't move, didn't speak, but their presence was overwhelming, a weight pressing down on my chest. I don't remember running, but suddenly I was at the entrance, gasping for air, the sun blinding after hours in the dark. The tunnel behind me was silent, as if it had swallowed my screams. I never published my findings. Some things are better left unspoken, some horrors too great to share. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear the whispers again, and I wonder if they followed me out, or if a part of me stayed behind, lost in the silent screams beneath Seoul. Break time equals 5s, greater than the dimly lit basement of the old apartment building in Seoul was a maze of pipes, wires, and forgotten storage units. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and mildew, a testament to the building's age and neglect. Park Min-jun, the maintenance worker, had been assigned to fix a leak in the basement. It was a routine job, one he had done countless times in other buildings, but something about this place made his skin crawl. As he navigated through the narrow corridors, his flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Then, he heard it, a faint, muffled crying coming from behind a locked door at the end of the hallway. The door was old, its paint peeling, and it was secured with a heavy padlock that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Min Jun's heart raced as he approached, the crying growing louder, more desperate. He pressed his ear against the door, and the sorrow he felt was overwhelming, as if the very walls were weeping. His hands trembled as he reached for the lock, but something inside him screamed to run. The rational part of his mind told him it was just the wind or pipes, but the fear was paralyzing. Suddenly, the crying stopped, and the silence was even more terrifying. Min Jun backed away, his flashlight dying as he stumbled in the dark. He never returned to that basement, and the door remained locked, but sometimes, late at night, he could still hear the echoes of those silent screams beneath Seoul. Break time equals 5s, greater than the neon lights of Seoul flicker above, casting long shadows that dance across the pavement as the city pulses with life. Yet, beneath its vibrant surface lies a network of underground passages, shortcuts known only to those who dare to traverse their dimly lit corridors. Among them is Min Jun, a university student, late for his evening class, deciding to take one such shortcut to save time. The passage is quieter than usual, the usual hum of distant conversations absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that seems to swallow sound itself. Min Jun's footsteps echo unnaturally loud, a stark contrast to the silence that surrounds him. It's then that he feels it, a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, as if unseen eyes are boring into him from the darkness ahead. He stops, turning sharply, his heart pounding in his chest. The corridor behind him is empty, the fluorescent lights flickering weakly, casting more shadows than light. It's nothing, he mutters to himself, trying to shake off the unease that grips him. But as he resumes his walk, the feeling intensifies, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The air grows colder, his breath visible in front of him despite the mild evening. Then, a sound, a whisper so faint it might have been the wind, except there is no wind underground. It's a voice, or perhaps many voices, murmuring words he can't quite make out. Min Jun's pace quickens, his rational mind struggling against the primal fear urging him to run. The whispers grow louder, more insistent, now clearly coming from the shadows that seem to shift and move at the edge of his vision. He breaks into a run, the exit just ahead, but the corridor stretches impossibly long, the door no closer than before. The whispers are screams now, silent screams that resonate in his skull, a cacophony of terror and despair. He collapses to his knees, hands over his ears, but the screams are inside him, a part of him. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stops. The silence returns, heavier than before. Min Jun looks up, the exit now within reach. He stumbles forward, bursting into the cool night air, the sounds of the city a welcome relief. But as he glances back at the passage, a figure stands at the threshold, silhouetted against the dim light, watching. Then, it's gone. Min Jun is left with the unshakable feeling that something followed him out, something that now walks the streets of Seoul, silent, unseen, but always watching. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air was thick with the scent of mildew and something metallic, a combination that made Ji-hoon's stomach churn as he and his girlfriend, Soo-min, descended the crumbling staircase into the depths of the abandoned underground hospital. The flickering light from their flashlights cast long shadows on the walls, revealing peeling paint and graffiti that seemed to whisper warnings in the dim light. Ji-hoon had suggested this exploration, a thrill-seeker at heart, but now, the oppressive silence was making him question his decision. Soo-min clung to his arm, her grip tightening with every step. The hospital was a relic of the past, a place where whispers of unethical experiments and forgotten patients lingered in the air. Their footsteps echoed ominously, the only sound in the otherwise silent abyss. As they turned a corner, their lights illuminated a row of rusted beds, most of them broken and covered in dust. But one stood out, pristine, with leather restraints that looked recently used. The sight sent a chill down Ji-hoon's spine. Soo-min's breath hitched, her voice barely above a whisper, someone was here. Recently. The realization dawned on them both, they were not alone. The sound of dragging footsteps echoed from the darkness beyond, slow and deliberate. Ji-hoon's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with possible escape routes. Soo-min's nails dug into his arm, her fear palpable. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by a low, guttural breathing that didn't sound entirely human. In a moment of panic, Ji-hoon pulled Soo-min behind a nearby pillar, their flashlights turned off to hide their presence. The darkness enveloped them, the only light coming from the faint glow of emergency exit signs that had long since lost their power. The footsteps paused, then resumed, moving away. But the relief was short-lived as a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, followed by the sound of something, or someone, being dragged. Ji-hoon and Soo-min exchanged terrified glances, realizing the horror they had stumbled upon was far from abandoned. The hospital was still in use, and they were the next patients. With no other choice, they made a run for the exit, the sounds of pursuit close behind. The last thing Ji-hoon heard before the darkness consumed him was Soo-min's scream, abruptly cut off. The silent screams beneath Seoul had found their voice, and it was far too late to escape. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air was thick with the musty scent of age as I led the group down the narrow staircase into Seoul's historic underground shelters. The dim lighting cast long shadows on the damp walls, and the occasional drip of water echoed ominously. My name is Ji-hoon, and as a tour guide, I've walked these tunnels countless times. But today, something felt off. The group was smaller than usual, just 12 people, all eager to explore the hidden depths of the city's past. As we descended, I could feel the temperature drop, a chill creeping up my spine that had nothing to do with the cool underground air. I started the tour, my voice steady despite the growing unease. These shelters were built during the Korean War, a refuge from the bombs above, I explained, the words feeling heavier than usual. The group listened intently, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights. That's when I noticed it. A 13th figure standing at the back, their face obscured by shadow. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the figure remained. I counted the group again. 13. My heart pounded as I tried to recall if I'd missed someone during the initial head count. I discreetly asked the person next to me if they knew the extra individual. They shook their head, confusion etched on their face. The air grew heavier, each breath a labor as the reality of the situation settled in. The tunnels seemed to close in around us, the walls whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I quickened the pace, eager to reach the end of the tour. But the figure persisted, always just at the edge of my vision, never speaking, never interacting. The group's chatter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. The final stretch of the tour was the most harrowing. The lights flickered violently, and for a moment, I thought I heard a whisper, a voice that wasn't there. "Who are you?" I wanted to scream, but the words caught in my throat. As we emerged into the daylight, I did a final head count. 12. The extra person was gone, leaving no trace behind. The group dispersed, none the wiser to the horror we just experienced. But I knew. Something had followed us out of those tunnels, something that didn't belong. That night, as I lay in bed, the whispers returned, a silent scream beneath the city, waiting to be heard. The next tour was already scheduled, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the 13th figure would be waiting, ready to join us once more. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air in the underground parking lot was thick with the smell of concrete and oil, a sterile yet oddly comforting aroma that Minji had grown accustomed to. The flickering fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the empty space, their intermittent buzzing the only sound breaking the silence. Minji, a struggling artist, had come here seeking inspiration, or perhaps just a momentary escape from the cacophony of Seoul above. The isolation was what she craved, or so she thought. As she sketched absently in her notebook, the sound of a whisper cut through the silence, so faint she wasn't sure she'd heard it at all. Then it came again, clearer this time, and her blood ran cold. It was her own voice, repeating a thought she'd had moments ago about the loneliness of the city. Her hands trembled as she looked around, the shadows seeming to shift unnaturally. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of her own thoughts being thrown back at her, words she'd never spoken aloud. Panic set in as she realized the voices were coming from all around her, from the very darkness she'd sought solace in. She ran, her footsteps echoing eerily, but the voices followed, whispering her deepest fears and insecurities. In her terror, Minji stumbled, falling hard onto the cold concrete. As she lay there, the whispers coalesced into a single, horrifying realization: the parking lot was alive, and it had been listening to her all along. The last thing she heard before the darkness consumed her was her own voice, whispering a thought she'd never dared to admit even to herself. The next morning, her sketches were found scattered across the parking lot, the last one a frantic, incoherent mess. Of Minji, there was no trace, save for a single sentence scratched into the concrete: "I never wanted to be alone."